Hey, all you Splinterheads, welcome back. Bronze Dragon here, saying thanks for dropping by and spending some time with me. Okay, it's Tuesday, so that means it was a patch day. There's a few things that were changed today, two main items. The first one, and we'll talk about both of them. The first one's a short one. You will now be able to re-roll your daily focus by burning vouchers. And here's the chart. Bronze is 0.5 vouchers, silver is 1, gold is 5, diamond is 10, and champion is 15. So I'm going to reserve opinion on this. It's not something I would probably take advantage of and use a lot, but it's nice to have it there just in case you get a focus. Let me restate that. You've always been able to re-roll the one time, but this allows you to go past that one time. So it's great to have it there. I mean, the availability is there. You get that one focus, two focuses that you just don't like. You can spend a few vouchers and get rid of it and go with something that's a little bit better. So we'll see how it works, but I think it's better than not having it. Plus, it goes a little ways in what everybody's been talking about, providing some more value for vouchers, some other ways for vouchers to be used. Now, the second thing and the biggest thing I will talk about is the updated terms of service. Now, right up front, I'm going to tell you this is going to be a little bit boring. There's a lot of legalese involved, but I'll say up front that one, I'm not a lawyer, so the opinions that I express are just that of a player, and in no way should be construed as legal advice. Okay, but with that said, I found some interesting things. I'll be the first one to say that I'm guilty, that I've been playing the game for a year, 2.5 through almost 3 years. Without having read the terms of service. I glossed through it when I initially started playing the game, but there was a few items that I came upon. Of course, we'll have the big items about what was changed today, but I thought that this would be a good chance to just go ahead, and especially for new viewers, new players in the Splinterlands ecosystem, to just go over some of the stipulations that's laid out within this legalese. And I'm not just calling out Splinterlands. All these games have this legalese, especially if you agree to a monthly service fee and things like this. There's 100 pages of stuff that most people, except for the people that write them in the legal team, we don't read. But it would be nice to go through it. I'm not going to sit here and read all of this because if you logged out and logged back in today after the patch, you'll be hit with this disclaimer, and this this is an acceptance to both the privacy policy and the terms of conditions. Now, I'm not going to go over the privacy policy, but I would say it's good to read it, especially if you live in places where privacy policies are a lot stricter and taken a lot more with the importance it should be. I live here in the States, but I'm very security minded, being in IT for a long time. So I wish we had the privacy policy implemented that Europe has. But with that said, especially if you're in Europe, I would take a look at this. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. And what I did was, to make it a little bit easier, I took all the pages and just copy and pasted it of the terms and conditions into a Word document here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through everything, obviously, because we'd be here for an hour. But I did go through and I highlighted some things that I thought were worth mentioning. And if you play the game, and especially if you have a lot of money invested in the game, I would go through and read it if I were you, because there was a few really surprising things to me. Of course, they start off with this, a basic statement. You should, read this. And they end up with, if you do not agree to these terms, you may not access or use the app or the site. So basically, they're saying that if you do not read this whole document, and you continue to use the service, it's almost like an implied that you agreed to it. Otherwise, if you come back, they can get you for this. So basically, right up front, if you don't agree to these terms, don't use our service, which is fair. I mean, a lot of businesses do that. Okay, so the first thing I'll point out is that I learned that Splinterlands, DBA Steam Monsters, Steam Monsters Corp, DBA Splinterlands, is headquartered here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I say that because I live right outside of Philly. So that's the first thing I learned. Okay, now going on, it seems like they have not really updated this part lately, but they did start off by stipulating how the packs of cards how they are picked, basically. And starting off, there's a predefined quantity that varies with each edition. And of course, you see right up front that this has not changed since Essence Orbs. Okay. Then they go on to say that the blockchain that our app is developed on maintains control over the pseudo-random elements of the card creation process, which means we cannot manipulate or influence the card creation process or the cards. That's very important to me. It's important to me from an aspect of, I know that right up front when they developed it, they say pseudo-random because I don't think there is any way to be truly random. But this whole process is controlled off and outside of their app, right? It's controlled on the blockchain. Okay. So we'll get into that on some other stipulations where they basically say that they can't control the blockchain, which is logical, right? But this main point says that they can't control what you get in your packs. Okay. That's all off of the Hive blockchain. Okay, next up is the probabilities. And they outline that if you open a pack, that 75.2% are common rarity, 20% are rares, 4% are epics, and 0.8% are legendaries. That's why you don't get many legendaries that often. Additionally, gold foil rarities are 2%. So that's a nice stat. And I don't know if those numbers have changed since at the beginning, we see that this has not been updated, this part, so I don't know if this still holds true, but it's in the terms and conditions, so I'm assuming it's true. So I'm going to skip through some of these. If you're completely interested in this, like I said, if you have been playing for years and you've never read this, I would say go ahead and read this. Next thing I wanted to point out was you understand that your Hive public address will be made publicly visible whenever you engage in a transaction on the app. Okay, so this may be, common knowledge to those of us who are used to working with the Hive blockchain. But there's a lot of people that are new to crypto and new to the game that don't necessarily know about it. Okay, so the Hive blockchain keeps a record of all transactions. And it's not going to say your name or whatever, but it will have a stipulation of what account and then what the action was. Okay, so this is a basic statement that you understand that your Hive public address will be made public visible, and basically anybody, given time or given the proper program to crawl through all the logs, could figure out, what you went and bought and things of this nature, or sold. Okay, the next item is you must provide accurate and complete registration information when you create an account for the app. Okay, I wanted to bring this up because this may be an item that kind of goes hand in hand with the changes they're implementing into the terms and conditions lately. And my main point here is that, over the last year and a half, they've been fighting against automated bot users and such. This item says that if you falsely created, or if you created and registered and created an account under with false information, that they can take action. Okay. And basically by creating an account, you're agreeing that you're providing accurate, current, and complete account information by yourself. And like it says, maintain properly, update necessarily your account. So what I'm pointed out is that if there are people that went in and created a bunch of accounts that for some reason they falsified information on or something like that to get this huge number of accounts, there's a possibility for action on that. Okay. And the next section is fees and payments. A lot of this stuff is straightforward, but I wanted to point this out. As between us, you will be solely responsible to pay any and all sales, use, value added, and other taxes, duties, and assessments. Okay. Here in the States, and I can't speak for other countries, but here in the States, it's a very touchy subject. We're at a what do I want to say? We're at a change in history, and I think, well, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think that the U.S. tax code is broken. It's broken beyond belief. It just needs to be scrapped and started over. But with that said, this is not a political TV show or a political show, but this basic statement says that when they change the tax laws, which the tax laws with crypto have changed each of the last 2 or 3 years, you're responsible. So if you made, I don't want to go too far into this, but because it'll, there's a fine line between giving tax advice, which I'm not a tax advisor, but the basic statement is you're responsible for paying your taxes if your locality taxes, crypto, and NFTs and things like that. So take what it is, take away what you will, but do your homework, and okay, we'll leave it at that. The other item I wanted to bring up, which I was interested in, I have a question about it, but not an answer. The next statement is, except for income taxes levied on Splinterlands, you, which is us the player, will pay or reimburse us for all national, federal, state, local, or other taxes and assessments. What's that mean? They're going to come back and request more taxes, pull a log and say, hey, you've bought $3,000 worth of cards in the last 2 years. You owe us this much money. I don't know. But this statement is in the terms and conditions. Okay, now purchasing credits. These are the basic credits you buy in the game for use. All payments by you via any payment method is done so at your own risk. Splinterlands expressly denies any liability regarding the purchase of credits offered through the Splinterlands store. So the thing I took out of this is, and I've never had a problem with that. I buy credits all the time. I've never really had a problem with that, okay? But if there were a problem, say you bought $100 worth of credits and you're going to go on and do a spending spree, buy yourself some cards, right? And then it didn't go through the blockchain correctly, or something did not happen correctly, they're not responsible. And you really, as far as I can see here, don't have much recourse, okay? Obviously, you could reach out to them, but, who knows? So the next thing, so I guess my main point on that is I never buy large quantities. I would buy what you're going to use as far as credits right then and leave it at that. And I try not to leave too much of a credit balance on my account. I buy what I'm going to use and I use it. So I don't buy a very large amount at a time. Okay, next item. You are 18 years of age or over. And there's another stipulation as we scroll down that goes with age here. But it's interesting that they point out that you have to be basically an adult. 18 is the age of consent here, and that changes in different states, but 18 years is generally considered an adult here in the States. So it's interesting. So this comes into play if you're going to have your children play, if your children are going to play Splinterlands. So if you have a minor that's going to have a Splinterlands account, you really have to look at these rules and see how you're going to set it up and try to do it, above board and be right about it. So I would take a look at that if you're in that situation. Next item I want to point out is all users are strictly prohibited from using credits to purchase items in Splinterlands from their own accounts or separate accounts that they control in an attempt to retrieve or receive any form of cryptocurrency in exchange. This was interesting to me because I hadn't really thought about it from this way, but basically this is money laundering in the form of crypto laundering, right? So you have fiat currency that you're going to trade for credits, and that fiat currency could be dirty or whatever, and then you trade it for credits, and then the credits you trade or you buy something off of one of your other accounts and get DEC out of it, and then exchange that for go to one of the services, exchange that out, and convert that back into fiat. So that's expressly forbidden. I just hadn't thought about it. Basically money laundering. Okay. So ownerships and restrictions is the next section. Basically, this paragraph, this mashed together large paragraph, basically says that they own the rights to the app and the artwork and all that. And you can't, just because you're buying cards doesn't mean you can take and use their assets for your financial gain as far as using the artwork. Obviously, there are some points where they have allowed people to, like, I can use some of their artwork if I'm making a Splinterlands video, because basically I'm advertising them, but you can't take their artwork and then go make a game of your own with their artwork that competes against them or something like that. So okay, so you hereby grant us a perpetual, irrevocable, non-exclusive, worldwide license under all rights necessary for us to incorporate and use your feedback for any purpose. So this paragraph goes on to say that you can submit feedback, your ideas for their game, your ideas to improve that game, but once you submit that feedback and that idea, it's their property, okay? So you can't come back and say, hey, that made you $1 billion. I want a chunk of it. You can't do it. I found that interesting. Okay, now here's where the new changes come in. This is under Ownership and Restrictions, Part 3, Section 13. Use, let's see where it's prefaced, by way of example and not as a limitation, you may not allow any third party to use any automated player, spider, algorithmic card selection or suggestion services, site search, retrieval, application, or other device to retrieve or index any portion of the app or the content posted on the app. In app, they mean Splinterlands, the game, or to collect information about its users and gameplay for any unauthorized purpose, or create user accounts by automated means or under false or fraudulent pretenses, which goes back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago. So there's your first change, okay? They've specifically called it out, okay? No bots. And specifically, to me, that would also cover helpers, right? Okay, 16. Utilize automated players within the following contexts: modern format ranked matches, any brawl matches, tournament matches. For the purposes of this provision, an automated player is defined as any software, script, or automated program that performs gameplay actions, including making card selections and submitting battles through the API without the direct and immediate input or control of the human users. Violation of these anti-automated player provisions may result in consequences determined by the app's administrators, including, but not limited to, temporary or permanent suspension of users' accounts, removal of game progress, or other appropriate measures. By continuing to use the app and participating in modern format ranked matches, tournaments, or brawls, you explicitly acknowledge and agree to abide by these anti-automated player provisions. So this is your anti-bot statement. So there you are. Under the termination section, you agree that we, in our sole discretion and for any or no reason, may terminate these terms and suspend and or terminate your accounts for the app. You agree that any suspension or termination of your access to the app may be without prior notice, and that we will not be liable to you or to any third party for any such suspension or termination. Now, I called this out, and it's interesting to me. A lot of different services have this kind of statement. We can ban you, whatever reason, doesn't matter. I call this out because it's very interesting to me, because they could just ban you just because they want to ban you. They can kick you out. Is that to their best interest to ban a guy that spent $10,000 in their game? Probably not, but it could happen. So there's that. Disclaimer section. One thing I'll call out, because I found it interesting, is we will not be responsible or liable to you for any losses you incur as the result of your use of the Hive network or an electronic wallet, including but not limited to any losses, damages, or claims arising from, and they say several things here, but the one I want to call out is server failure or data loss. And the interesting part there to me is that if their server fails and it causes a data loss, first of all, we've already learned that most of your all the cards and everything should exist on the blockchain, and they should have backups. Any company has backups. You have to have a data retention plan, right, as well as a backup plan, and go on forward. But it's interesting that anything that occurs that would be caused from a server failure, their hardware causing data loss that would impact you, they're not responsible for. Obviously, once again, it's to their best interest as a company to have backups and try to make everything right, but they're not responsible for it. Now, I don't know exactly how their servers are set up. I don't know exactly what type of loss a person could incur if their servers had failed, but I find it interesting that they're calling out that they're not responsible for their own server failure or data loss. So, okay, let's go on. Limitation of liability, the one part I called out here. Okay, you acknowledge and agree that you do not reside in a region that explicitly bans the use of loot boxes in games in accordance with gambling laws. Okay, I wanted to call this out because I don't know what percentage of users reside in Europe, but there are several countries and areas in Europe who have made a big thing about loot boxes. And I can't say I disagree, right? I can't say I disagree because there's some companies, and I'm not going to mention any big gaming companies, that really, it's gambling, okay? It's a gambling box. So just be aware that if you are playing from a country that bans loot box type games, then be aware of this statement. Okay, next up, assumption of risk. Number 2, you are solely responsible for determining what, if any, taxes apply to your Splinterlands related transactions. Splinterlands is not responsible for determining the taxes that apply to your transactions on the app, the site, or any blockchain. This goes back to my tax statement, okay? There are a lot of services out there that if they have crypto-related assets back and forth, exchanging, buying, selling, that they will provide you a statement at the end of the year, which would be nice. In fact, I think people have brought this up before. I would like to see that. Obviously, it would be an extra expense on the company, and even if they offered it and I had to pay for the service, I'd be fine with that. Because here, like I said, here in the U.S., the laws are changing because crypto is just it's just burgeoning. It's not coming out. It's been out for a while, but here in the States, what it comes down to is our government just wants to tax everything, and they don't like the fact that crypto is largely untaxed. That's the whole point of crypto, being kind of I'm getting off topic again. But okay, so this statement exists right there on itself. Be aware that you're responsible for paying your taxes if you think that the rules in your area say you need to pay taxes on them. Okay, here's another statement on children. You affirm that you are over the age of 13, as the app is not intended for children under 13. If you are 13 or older, but under the age of 18, or the legal age of majority where you reside. So if you're outside of the States and your legal age of majority is higher than that, you have to take that into consideration as well. Because if you're not, then you have to get your parent or guardian involved in this, okay? So I agree with this because especially if a kid got a hold of a credit card or something like this, they could log in, and it's not just Splinterlands, it's any game. Because every once in a while you hear about a game, or especially something on a phone or something like that, a mobile app, where a kid will get their mom's credit card and they'll just charge it to the moon, So I agree with this, but I wanted to call it out. Now, this is one of the last big items I want to bring up that I found really interesting. Okay, dispute resolution, arbitration. Okay, so what this calls out is that, I'll just read it. Except for disputes that qualify for small claims courts, all disputes arising out of or related to these terms of use or any aspect of the relationship between you and us, whether based in contract, tort, statute, fraud, misrepresentation, or any other legal theory, will be resolved through final and binding arbitration before a neutral arbitrator instead of in a court by a judge or jury. And you agree that Splinterlands and you are each waiving the right to sue in court and to have a trial by jury. You agree that any arbitration will take place on an individual basis. Class arbitrations and class actions are not permitted, and you are agreeing to give up the ability to participate in a class action lawsuit. There you go. Not saying I ever intended to sue the game or anything, but especially you get some of these big whales that's got a lot of money in the game, that might come into play at one time or another. So they gave up the right to sue. Or let me restate that. They gave up their right to a class action lawsuit, and they gave up their right to a court hearing because any dispute is going to be solved through arbitration. And I'm not a legal guy either, so you'd have to look up your definitions and talk to somebody that's a lawyer in your area. But I know it's much different than a court hearing. So there's that. I found that interesting. And as we always say, all most of us YouTubers, this is not investment advice. They call it out in their terms of service. We are not an investment company, okay? And that has, without getting too deep into it, that has is the basis of some of the reasons why they are using third parties to buy and sell SPS and DEC and not doing it directly with them. So it has gotten easier over time. They're building these bridges into the game. It's a lot easier than whenever I started out, but they call out that they are not an investment company. And this is the last thing I'll call out. Our failure to enforce any provision of these terms will not be deemed a waiver of such provision, nor of the right to enforce such provision. And the reason I called this out is because we have this whole thing where they put into the terms of service of the battle helper and bot statements. Okay. The problem with the battle helper statements is the fact that it's, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, because I'm not an expert in it, it's very difficult to tell if somebody's using a battle helper. Now, I hope that they find some ways to be able to find who's using them and take action if people are using them where they shouldn't be, and especially if people are using bots, obviously in modern or brawls. I'm strictly really against especially brawls and tournaments. To me, side note, personal opinion, I think brawls and tournaments should be 1v1, one human versus one human. Your brain against my brain. Your card deck against my card deck. So with that said, this statement says that just because maybe they don't catch a few people doing it and then they catch you, you can't have the excuse that says, well, they got away with it. It doesn't work. You know how that worked with your mom whenever you said that when you were a kid, right? Didn't work. Doesn't work here. So I'm going to wrap it up. And if you have any questions or if you have anything you would like me to look into further, leave it in the comments and tell me what you think about the changes. I think it's positive. I'm looking forward to, they've shown as a company that they're taking in the votes into account and making changes as requested by the voting population of the game, the investors. So with that said, this has been Bronze Dragon with a pretty long, hopefully not too boring, hopefully you got a few things out of it, legalese type update from Splinterlands. I hope everyone on your side is happy and healthy, and if you got anything out of this, leave a like and subscribe. Have a good one. I'll see you on the flip side.